go live. It's going. We're up.
Okay. Yeah,
I am gonna tweet about it. So this will be Arc is always strange when you're in a different window.
oh, I really think I need to give Arc another shot. For
I love
most people,
it.
I heard it took them 2
All in.
times. Did it only take you 1 time?
That's a good question. I don't feel like I gave it a hearty go the first time, so I
A
will
hearty go.
say yes. So
I just went I dropped my Spotlight keybind and went full raycast.
oh,
And, like, I
okay.
don't pay for shit. I'm a cheap person.
Uh-huh.
Raycast Pro is calling my
Get it?
name, like, I
Why?
want it.
What is it about it?
They offer okay, so, like, 1, advanced window commands. I really want that. So
What is that?
instead of just saying, like, for the currently selected window, move it to the left third or the top or the bottom or whatever, you can essentially, like, tell a command to put a window in a very specific place. And so,
Oh,
like, think about, like, when Wes Boss
geez.
does his
That's
TikTok
nice.
recordings for, like,
Yeah.
vertical, he has very specific places for windows, and this is essentially what Raycast would do, is, like, you run one command and it, like, bloop,
Okay.
puts everything where it needs to go.
Well, okay, so I know Raycast gets rid of a lot of other apps, but I also have Keyboard Maestro. So I'm wondering if I could just keybind something to Keyboard Maestro in order to do the same thing
So
instead of, like, paying for it.
Raycast has support for, keybinds inside of it in the free
Right,
version. So
right.
you
That's
can
how I use it right now.
Mhm,
Now I
yeah,
did pay for the paid version for when I set up my new computer because
mhm,
I wanted to sync all of my settings. So that
mhm,
was really nice that it synced it to my new computer. And then I was experimenting with the AI stuff for a while, and then I, like, went through this stint where I was like, "I've gotta cut back on all my expenses." So then I
yeah.
ended up dropping Raycast Pro.
That's what's kinda nice, though, like, Raycast Pro basically gives you AI for $8 a
Yeah,
month, which is cheap
yeah,
in comparison to, like, going and paying for ChatGPT and then
yep,
going and paying for the other one, and,
yep,
now you just get AI, but you get it in a better way. You don't have to go to
mhm,
chatgpt.com, it is
right,
where you are, and I think that's the value of Raycast is, like, when your hands are on the keyboard and they just make it easier to do everything,
mhm.
it's I think it's an easy choice at this point.
I'll tell you what else is interesting is I started to get into Perplexity AI.
Perplexity is one thing I did install on my phone where I was like, "I just want answers to questions, not bullshit results."
Mm,
Somebody put, like, a kinda like a web comic up on Twitter that I saw where, like, it was like, "Then," and it was like Google, and, like, the first box was your answer, and it's like, "Now," and it's a whole page of
sponsor,
sponsored
yes,
results and suggestions and things, and
yes,
then your result is, like, right at the fold, and
yeah,
it's terrible. Like,
yeah,
Google sucks now for what it was supposed to
yeah,
be doing.
yeah. Well, Gemini's gotten better, so they do put Gemini stuff, like, at the top, but,
Uh,
Perplexity's been great for, like, coding questions,
yeah.
and, like, I will kinda maybe get into this, but, yeah, this will be a good spicy take, for today, but, I almost prefer it to in some ways, to, Copilot chat within VS Code because Copilot chat within VS Code doesn't always take into account the context of where I was at. So, like, I was asking it questions this morning, for example, and it gave me an answer, and I was like, "Okay, this is V2 documentation. What about V3?" And it gave me the same answer. And I was like,
Mm,
"Lame." And I went to Perplexity, and it the thing is, it gives you search results. So it's like, okay, if I
yeah,
want to know more information, I can just click on those things.
yeah. Yeah, I was looking through Prismadocs this morning. Prismadocs are awesome. Everything is there, but it's getting to the point where it's actually hard to find certain things just because, like, they're so massive.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised they don't have AI integration on their docs.
I actually think they do. I probably should leverage it more. I just sometimes I look at those buttons and I'm like, "Ah, I can do this, you
Yeah.
know?
It doesn't really know. I'm
Yeah.
smarter than a computer. That's funny.
Did you have a spicy question?
Oh, yeah, so this is not related to tech at all,
Uh,
but I was on Twitter this week, and it was like, "Okay, settle this." It was a husband-wife debate.
mhm.
"Settle this for me. Do you floss your teeth before or after you brush?" And my mind was like, "I didn't know that was an option."
Okay, yeah, same. There's only one time to floss your teeth, and it's say it with me, 1, 2, 3,
Oh. After.
After.
Okay,
Yes.
good. I was like, well, here's the crazy thing. I was like, the dentist does it after, so I do it after. But
I never
then,
thought
like,
about
I
that.
started Googling it because I was like, what are people saying? And the American Dental Association suggests before.
What?
Well, actually, I did see yeah, they did say before because they were like, "You gotta loosen the stuff and then brush it away," was their whole thing. But I also saw somebody say, "Brush your teeth, don't rinse your mouth," which that was a whole 'nother rabbit trail trail I didn't that sounds so gross. I always rinse my mouth.
Yeah.
Like, you spit everything out, but it was like, let the fluoride just sit on on your teeth. And so then you can, like, use floss, and that'll help get the fluoride between your teeth more.
Um,
This
I've
opened a whole new
heard
world for me.
we've got, like, a friend of my wife's is a, like, a dentist, and he basically says, "If there's one thing that you do, floss. If you don't do anything else, if you don't do
Really?
Listerine, if you don't brush, flossing is the most important thing you can
Really?
do
Oh,
if you're feeling, like, lazy for some reason at any time."
yeah.
It
I'm
just
not great
it
at
gets
flossing.
everything out of where food would normally
Uh,
just kind of bury
that's
in.
it. I'm not great at flossing. I was talking to Henry about it, and he was like, "I don't floss." And the thing is, he goes to the dentist, and they're like, "You have perfect teeth." And he's like, "I always get to the end, and they're like, 'We would tell you to floss, but we've just been gushing over how great your teeth look. So, I mean, just do what
Wow.
you're doing.'" It's
You know,
like,
and I also feel like people have different teeth shapes where some people's
"Oh,
teeth
yeah."
just catch all the food and some
Yes.
people's teeth just doesn't.
Yes, that is legit. So I took my girls to the dentist recently, and they said I can't remember which one it was, had pits in the side of their teeth, which Henry's had. We went to one dentist, and he was like, "Nobody's ever told me I had pits," but she was like, "I need to fill them." So, but anyways, apparently one of our girls has it too, where they
Hmm,
were like, "You gotta clean the pits."
clean the pits. All right.
Okay, do you wanna jump in? I'm so excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna teach me a lot, and then yeah, it's gonna be a good one.
Well,
It's
it's
just
gonna be
it's
fun.
people have been talking about it.
I know. Well, and we're gonna be a little spicy about it. And you can't see it. It's barely on screen. I wore this
Yeah.
shirt intentionally, and I had my remix shirt right next to it, and I was like, "Which one do I reach for?"
Hold on. You have a remix shirt? You gotta be kidding me. I need one.
Yes!
I need
Yes.
one.
Hold I wonder if they're here. Hold on. Oh, I don't see them. At React Conf, they were giving away these awesome notebooks too. They're like little
Ooh,
tiny ones, and the cover looked like it was made out of a record. They're so cool.
awesome.
Yes, so in the chat, not sure what I walked into, clean
Yeah.
the pits. We're talking about teeth. Dental hygiene, okay.
Or
And
armpits, you decide.
oh man, full stack dental hygiene. Do you wear a mouth guard? I'm supposed to wear a mouth guard too, I grind my teeth. Okay, both important. Okay, let me cue up the song. Let's do that because that's always awkward when I forget. So we're gonna have an awkward moment on the front end instead of the back end. There we go. Okay. Full stack. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. And today we have some spicy takes on Laravel versus full stack JavaScript.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brad Garapi. I'm a full stack developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
And today we are sponsored by Sanity. Sanity is I'd call it sometimes a headless CMS. It's more than that. They are all about composability and really being able to manage your data from a single source of truth, which I found to be fantastic. We used to have the compressed blog site on Next.js site and recently migrated over to Remix. And it was super simple because all of our data was in Sanity. We already had all the queries written and we could just port those directly over to Remix. So Sanity has some great new features where you can actually edit the text directly on the page and it'll get saved to your Sanity database. We've had Knut and our friend Cap on the show a couple times. So we encourage you to check out those episodes, but give Sanity a look. That's sanity.io. Thanks to Sanity for sponsoring.
Okay, so the internet is a buzz with talking about Laravel. Like the JavaScript community
Yeah.
is talking about Laravel. Maybe we should start with like, how did this conversation get started? Do you have
I'm
any idea?
I didn't prep you with this question, and I'm so glad you asked it because it started at React Conf. I don't think a lot of people know that, but it started at React Conf with just the JavaScript frameworks that were there and other people talking about full stack and what that means, talking about Laravel and what that means. And then it's like everybody came home and continued that conversation online, but nobody knew that. And so if you weren't there, it just kind of jumped in and piled on. And one of the interesting things, Adam Wathan actually tweeted about this. He was like, I love, like, I say arguing, maybe discussing stuff in person because you can bring in body language, intonation, all those things. And you know that somebody means well. You can have an honest conversation without hurting feelings. And then it just gets weird sometimes when you take that conversation online and you start like injecting what you assume is like intonation, and it might not be intended that way. So anyways, the conversations have kind of turned a little sideways in some ways with people getting really passionate about what does the full stack really mean and what does that look like?
Yeah, and like I saw a couple tweets around the same time. Like I actually feel like I want to say it was Taylor Otwell dropped like this tweet that
Yeah.
was a to-do app in like a single image, and he was like, "This is it. This is the Laravel to-do app." And then I saw Ryan Florence put up a tweet, and maybe this was after the React Conf discussions, where he was like, "Send me the best examples of Laravel apps," and you could just feel like he was getting ready to do the thing that he does, where he like pits one thing against another, not to be rude, but to talk about the trade-offs in architecture.
Yeah.
Just like he was like rating people's, Trello clones. He was like B minus and stuff. I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, it's oh man. So this is really interesting because I had a great conversation with Sam. Sam's been on the show as well. He has a podcast called Front and First. We actually talked about this at the speakers dinner at ReactConf. And he had a great way of explaining kind of the disparity between the two. And what's interesting is recently I've been building a project out in Laravel. And part of the reason why is because I don't feel like you can intelligently talk about a framework, what you like and don't like, unless you actually build a project on it. It's one thing to go through a tutorial. I love a to-do app. I know people hate on them, but I feel like you get a good understanding of CRUD because that's mostly what these apps are: create, read, update, and delete. You get a good feel for all those things. But until you build a project at scale, you still don't like stress test a framework and are really able to develop opinions until you put it through its paces. And so this whole conversation is really timely for me because obviously I'm on Redwood JS core team. So I work on a full stack JavaScript framework. I'm building a side project on Laravel. I also have experience in all the other ones, Next and Remix and Astro. And so you better believe I have opinions. But I think just to kind of summarize it, and then, we can kind of go back and forth on stuff. I think all frameworks, I'm not trying to take like the easy answer out of this, but I think all frameworks have something good to offer and they're all trying to solve a specific problem. And so when you understand what your problem is, then it makes it easier to pick a solution and know which tool you're reaching for.
Yeah, and you got to realize that all frameworks come at problems from different angles.
That's right.
A lot of the frameworks that you mentioned start at the front end and then work their way towards the back end or towards that network chasm there. Whereas Laravel takes the opposite approach. It starts at the back end and then
That's right.
tries to go as far as it can towards the front end.
That's
My
right.
favorite, explanation of these concepts thus far has been the Aaron Francis video that was released, Laravel versus React.
I need to
It's
watch that one.
awesome. And it even has like these really cool diagrams that shows how like, each one approaches the same problem from a different point, and they
Yeah.
kind of have a natural stopping point where this is where you have to either adopt another technology to fill in the gap when it comes to either interaction on the front end
Yeah.
or complexity on the back end, or you kind of like deal with a slightly less powerful, set of tools where that framework doesn't excel or doesn't focus on. And so
That's
at the
right.
end of the day, like they can do it all. You might just have to bring in support from other tools to get it done.
That's right. And that's basically what Sam said when I talked to him. He was just saying that he's talking about a ceiling and a floor. And
Yeah.
the ceiling is basically what your starting point is and how that lifts you up and gives you a place to start your project from. And then the ceiling is kind of where you hit those upper limits that you have to kind of press into or push against in order to go where you want. So he was just making the point that, like, what's interesting is, people talk about, well, JavaScript full stack isn't where, say, Laravel and Rails are. That's true. But that's because, like, JavaScript, we didn't even have that as an option on a back end until
Yeah.
recently, until
Yeah.
the last, like, what, 10, 15 years.
Yes. Of course
Um,
it's not there. That's like
yeah.
saying Laravel isn't doing everything for the front end that React is doing. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not a JavaScript solution at the end
Server.
of the day.
It's PHP. It's on the server.
Right. Right. Um, okay, I guess I'll kind of say my level of experience with Laravel,
Yeah.
which is 0, at the end of the day. I have been watching, like, a lot of content, looking through the docs. I was so close to starting up a Laravel project here, and it's gonna happen in the near future. But that's where I'm at. I'm trying to understand the concepts, what problems it solves, what features it offers, um, and then just having these conversations to try to learn more. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So if you are approaching Laravel, probably the biggest shift in how you think about the project, aside from like front end, back end, whatever, in terms of architecture, they use what's called an MVC pattern. That stands
Mhm.
for Model View Controller. And so the idea with that is you have your model, which kind of sets up your relationships and how your database works. So if you have something that's like a has many, one to one, whatever, you set up those relationships within your model.
Your
And then
model is like your database schema is kind of the way I view it. Your
yeah,
data structure,
yeah, so you don't have your exact database structure within your model. Like,
right?
if you wanna put it in JavaScript terms, you have, say you're using Prisma.
Sure.
Prisma, you just list everything out all in one place, all in one file. Within Laravel, you would have a migration, which Prisma actually writes that migration for you, so you don't have
Right.
to. But you have a migration file where you're writing that out yourself, and then
Ooh.
your model is then establishing the relationships between those things.
So you
Does that make sense?
define your data, like your tables separately,
That's right.
and then you add in the relationships like later through
That's
these
right,
migrations?
and so,
Oh,
like,
weird.
you'd still say, like, if you have a foreign key, you'd still establish that within your migration, but
Okay.
within your model, you're gonna say you're kind of gonna give definition around that relationship to say, "Hey, this has many," or "This just has one." You can kinda think of your model more as, like, describing the properties for that. So, for example, you could set up a protected value that, or you could set up a property that explains all the validation rules for a form. Or you could say, like, hey, a user shouldn't be able to add this value to the database. I want to protect it. I want to guard it. That's what they call it.
So
Is guard it.
permissions come into play here as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
built
So, and
in.
that's another thing you never have with JavaScript is you don't have
Yeah.
protected and public values. And if you've worked with stricter programming languages, you can, like, say the user cannot touch this value. You have that in PHP. You don't have that in JavaScript.
So do you think then that, like, let's say compared to something like Prisma, the the Laravel type version of this is a little bit more, yes, it's more advanced, it's more powerful. Is it tougher to pick up on? Because I always find something about like folks who do backend stuff is they're much more in tune with databases and SQL and database queries and indexing than I ever was. Like I can totally
Mhm.
get by with an ORM,
Yep.
but I don't dive deeper, you know? And do you think that's kind of like a required skill to work in Laravel?
No, so sorry, I started to combine different words. So Laravel
Eloquent.
has an ORM, which is an
Yeah.
object relationship manager called Eloquent. And so
Hmm.
you can kind of use their phrasing for stuff. So
Okay.
even within this other project, I haven't written a single SQL statement. You
Cool.
could
Okay.
write more complex things.
But these
Um,
migrations though that you were talking about, right? That's SQL, is it not?
No, it's their eloquent stuff. So I'm saying,
Oh, okay.
like, here's a
Okay.
property. It looks kind of like Prisma. I mean, it's not the
Okay.
exact same syntax, but I'm saying, like, hey, this is a string. This is required. Here's the default value. And it just looks like chaining almost in JavaScript.
Yeah, the PHP arrows, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
gotcha.
shoot, it's messing me up so bad, the
Yeah.
fact that these arrows are different than JavaScript errors. And I'll, like, look at stuff, I'm like, "Why am I getting a linting issue?" "Oh, wrong language."
Like,
Trying to flip
you know
back
what?
and
We should stop there for a second. And
forth.
you do have experience with this. What is it like writing in a different language? Are you using VS Code? What does the
Yeah,
linting and formatting look like? What is PHP like today, right? Because I know I've
yeah.
heard that PHP has gone through a lot of changes. and now the
Mhm.
new functional way of writing PHP is kind of really nice. But like,
Yep.
talk about that.
Yep. So, and this is a good question too. So, when I ran my own business, it was mostly WordPress stuff
Hmm.
that I built. So, I wrote PHP. I'm used to PHP. I'd started to dabble a little bit in Laravel, but that was probably around Laravel 2. So, some of these concepts that I'm coming into aren't completely foreign to me just because I looked at it, but now we're on Laravel 11. So, it's evolved quite a bit since then. It's a lot nicer now, like 1,000 times nicer. So I'm using VS Code. A lot of I feel like PHP Laravel enthusiasts use PHP Storm, which is kind of interesting. But with VS Code, I do have linting turned on. It will pop up a message that says, "Hey, like we can't reformat right now. You have an issue," and that is so much nicer when you're working with it in a strict language. So JavaScript, I've gotten to the point where I forget to write semicolons. Sometimes I'll write semicolons, but ESLint will usually take care of all that, and Prettier will take care of all that for me. And so within PHP, you have to have semicolons. And I remember
Yeah.
back in the day, I would spend forever, an hour trying to hunt down a bug only to realize I left out a semicolon. And so the fact that you have linting now that'll say, "Hey, this line right here, you need a semicolon," is really nice. I'm not spending as much time trying to figure out what the problem is.
So when you've got that linting, do you still have to go in and add that semicolon yourself, or can you just,
Yeah.
command S and boom, everything
Yeah.
plops into
I
place?
I do have to go back and add it. So in some regard, the linting and the ESLint rules are not as nice as they are within JavaScript. And the fact
Okay.
that JavaScript will do that is still reformat my code a little bit, but it is just a touch nicer uh within the JavaScript ecosystem. You still have type like IntelliSense, it'll still give you a lot of that, but again, I just don't feel like it's quite as responsive as it is within the JavaScript world. What's interesting though, I will say about this is the first time that I've really tried to level up. Excuse me. This is the first time I really tried to level up in a programming language or a framework using AI. And so that's been a different experience,
Yeah, I bet.
because before that wasn't a thing. And so now the fact that I can tell AI, "Hey, I'm getting this error message. What is it?" Or "I'm trying to do this," and it'll give suggestions. And obviously, I don't have the expertise yet to be able to quickly say, "Oh, this is right, this is wrong." But
Right.
it does give me a leg up, and I'm not like feeling like I can't make any progress at all.
And I feel like Copilot should between IntelliSense and Copilot, like, you should be doing pretty good as far as, like, doing basic actions on
That's right.
the data and models you've already defined.
That's right. Sometimes the syntax can be a little off, but at least like logically, it can set me on the right track.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
where this falls apart, so I had kind of mentioned pre-show, I had a take about Laravel, and then it all changed this weekend.
Okay.
So let me explain that a little bit, and this is kind of where the AI stuff fits in as well. And kind of fits into the discussion that we were talking about before, approaching the same problem from different angles. So um, I'll give some history to where this is coming from. So I have a very large freelance project that I'm working on. I started building it on Remix because I wanted to get Remix experience. And I was chugging along, felt like it was great, but there were some things that I felt like were a little fragile with the database stuff. I wasn't using Prisma, so I didn't have those migrations. So
Mm.
it was like if I ever change databases, if something happens with my schemas, like I'm in big trouble.
What
So
were you
there were just
doing
parts
then?
of it that were weird.
If you
Uh,
weren't using an ORM, what were you doing?
yeah, so I was just plugging into Supabase, which I'm a huge fan of Supabase.
Gotcha.
Supabase does have Supabase migrations. I didn't bother to go through all that, but it was like if like, for example, the client was like, "Hey, if we put this on my account, what does that look like?" And it was like, "Ooh, do I have to rewrite all these things?" And it's different if it's just a hacker project that I'm just, whittling away at. But if it's a client project, I'm having to hand it off, or they're
Right,
locked. You have that vendor lock in with Supabase.
right.
So, and then some of the stuff with Remix, which I do like Remix, but I felt like their router fell over. It didn't
Mm,
error in the sense, but I just had so many issues with trying to maintain layouts and nested files and trying to find what I wanted. It was just it was a huge problem. Like it just became really hard to manage. And so then I moved it to Redwood. And I was like, "Oh, this is so nice. I love how we have our router. I love the fact that I have database calls and I had more flexibility with GraphQL. I can have everything encapsulated within a component." But the hard part is I have all this data, but to be able to display that properly on the front end, because they basically have a marketing site that all this has to fit into, is going to cause problems with the SEO until we get to React Server Components and
Sure.
SSR. So like all that stuff is in canaries right now. It's not really stable. Like I've got to be able to launch this stuff. And it's like, I know in the back of my head, I'm not delivering the best product to the client because they're not going to get the SEO value that they need out of the site. The other side of it, and this is where it started to fall over as I started to get into more of the back end stuff because it's in a serverless, and this will all change with RSC and SSR. I had to reach for ingest because I have to like there's an AI component. So if I want to send this off to AI, well, you guys know you send a query to AI, you got to wait a couple minutes. So then with waiting for that, that's a problem in a serverless environment. You can't
Yeah.
always wait for that. Or I'm talking about sending massive amounts of email. You can't just wait, like queue all that stuff up. You have to send that over to ingest to handle that, to be able to send through like Resend or Postmark or one of these other services. So it all works, but then I started tacking on all these services. So it's easy to say, oh, the JavaScript ecosystem is free. It's free, but then I'm paying for Supabase because it's a company. It's going to grow. Then I'm paying for ingest because I have to handle all these jobs. I'm paying for OpenAI, like all these things, they all start adding up. So anyways, this is where I'm coming at it from. I started with the front end, started moving to the back end, and that's where I started feeling
And
these
don't
pain.
forget, like every integration to a service is also glue code that you have to set up. There's
Yep.
environment variables you got to do,
Yep.
accounts you have to manage, right? It's in some cases it's a plus because more than
Yep.
one person can log into the admin dashboard and see, but it is a lot of glue and a lot of environment variables and things to keep everything running. And it
That's
makes local development like kind of crazy, right? You have to set up
right.
these 15
Right.
things to make sure you can just run the app.
Well, and that's one of the things that the JavaScript ecosystem loves right now is this composability mindset where it's like I can pull the best of everything and I can like really cater to my preferences, which is true. But as you're saying, you have to set up all those things. And so that
Yeah.
becomes a lot.
Yeah.
Which, is a side plug. One of the reasons I like Redwood is because it's opinionated and it does
Yeah.
handle a lot of that stuff for you. So anyways, about this time I started thinking, oh man, Laravel, this is looking interesting. I just heard more buzz on it. This is obviously pre React Conf, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just see what would it look like if I port this app again, because I have shiny platform syndrome. What would happen if I port this over? And so usually when I approach a project, because I have more front end design experience, I like to do the front end design part first. You like to make it look nice and pretty and clicky and reactive. So I thought this time, because I'm going to start with the problems that I'm having, which are jobs and OpenAI and backend stuff, making complex database calls, figuring out all these relationships. And so what I did was I made like the ugliest looking app, but I got all the backend stuff to work.
Sure.
And I got it to work fast. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, this is crazy. Again, it's approaching the problem from a different direction. So where Laravel shines is all that backend stuff. It has jobs built in. It has email stuff built in. And a lot of these things, yes, it supports like Postmark and Resend and all that, but it supports it out of the box. So in the config, you just say, I'm going to use Resend. And
Yeah.
it can pull in that driver and you don't have to worry about it. Other things that I was working on, like I need to be able to generate a PDF, like pulled in a package, done. Like it's so easy. I
Well,
have to generate QR codes, pull in a package, done. Like all this stuff just works. I did pull in a couple of third-party packages, but that all works out of the box. I'm going to reformat images, done. Like you just drop all that stuff in. And those are all the hard parts about JavaScript that we're all like fighting with right now.
yeah.
So I was like, oh my goodness, I love Laravel. Like, am I allowed to say that? I love Laravel. So then this weekend, I'm like, okay, I have most of the back end solved. I need to start pulling in these front end components that I built within Redwood. And so that's when I felt the pain. And I was like, this is why people started to lean towards JavaScript is the front end stuff is hard. And part of me is like, well, it shouldn't be that hard because a lot of it's just crud. And so it's like even just simple reactive stuff. And let me just paint the picture of what makes it hard. So you have PHP that you're using Laravel in, and then their templating language is Blade. So you're porting it from PHP to Blade. And then if you want reactivity, a lot of times you're using Livewire, which almost gives you React Server Components type abilities.
The sense on
And then
HTML, right?
right,
Like,
right, and
yeah,
then, like, you could just make calls, like, think of, like, Remix where you have
yeah,
that those hooks to go back to the server to post stuff. Like, Livewire will let you do that, where you can kinda go back and forth, you can update counters and things like that with Livewire. So, you have that, and then if you want any reactivity though, because that's still going back to the server, if you want reactivity, like being able to hover or drag and drop, then you gotta pull in a JavaScript
that's a
library. So then
JavaScript
I'm
file.
pulling
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
Alpine. And
Okay,
Alpine's kind of like I'd say like a dumbed down React stuff.
sure.
Like
Like
it makes
sprinkles
it
of JavaScript interactivity.
yeah, and so this is where I've had trouble, is when
Yeah,
I'm trying to troubleshoot, it's like, okay, is the problem going from PHP to Blade, from
yeah.
Blade to Livewire, from Livewire to Alpine? Okay, now I have a nested component. Am I going back to PHP? Like, how is
It's
this getting passed over?
you know how, like, if you approach this problem from the front end, your brain gets fragmented from all the different services you have to use on the back end? And, like, flip that on its head. You're using this awesome consolidated back end,
Mhm.
and now you're trying to, do more advanced things on the front end, and you're kind of, like, quote, unquote, "pulling in services." This for interactivity, this for,
Yeah.
like, refetching new data, and you don't know where things are happening, and that kinda feels very analogous.
Yeah,
So,
well, and
like
I was hunting down a bug forever thinking it was
yeah,
Livewire. Alpine. As soon as and the syntax is so similar, some of it's brackets, some of it's curly brackets, some of it's arrows,
too
and
much
it's just
context switching
hard to
too.
know. Yeah, it's hard to know where's the breakdown and what does this look like. And some of it I've been trying to figure out, okay, is this because this is new to me and I don't know?
Mhm.
Or and I'm just trying to get over this hump of not of like my knowledge gap, or is this just like the hard part? And, I think it's probably a combination of both.
So I think here is the a benefit that approaching these problems from the front end will always have. You're gonna have to use JavaScript on the front end. So if somehow JavaScript gets a Node.js based, Laravel style framework, you don't have to context switch languages. You're always using
That's right.
JSX, you're always using
That's right.
JavaScript, right? Whereas if you ever use a PHP backend or a Go backend or
Mhm.
whatever you want to use, you will always have a context switch built in, and you're
Yep.
probably going to have some kind of templating language as well to throw in there
Yep.
if you want like SSR type support. So
That's
you will always have multiple technologies if you don't pick JavaScript on the back end, which okay, now coming back to this all, like,
right.
maybe we should just solve this in JavaScript at the end of the day so that we don't have to context switch and we can
Yeah.
keep going with all this. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the ideal solution.
Right. Right. So I think, that's probably my conclusion. I'm not ready to give up on Laravel. I think it's a great solution, but
Sure.
I think the future is really bright for JavaScript and the direction that it's going and the things that we're learning. It's not there yet, but I think the future is bright and the things that we are able to solve with RSC and SSR.
So, what if we just drew a hard line between Laravel and your front end framework? Could you treat Laravel like a headless API, take all of its backend sweetness, and then just use it?
You could, and I need to experiment with that. I did see a blog post where somebody was like, "I have a Next front end on my Laravel app, and it's awful trying to maintain
Mm,
between the 2." There are pieces of it where I feel like, oh, you still are, like, reaching out for an API, like, the remix Supabase issues that I was having. I feel like that those problems would still exist trying to go not in the same level, maybe that's not a great example because, like, it's not handling things like jobs and queues and things like that that I was struggling with that you get with
right.
Laravel. But to your point, there's still like a context switch. Some of the nice things about Laravel are the fact that you can set up different routing things, almost like Remix, where I can say, "Hey, this is a patch, so this I'm going to update it, send it to this route, and it'll be able to handle it." It's smart enough to figure out what item in the database you're working with, and can do a lot of like really nice stuff. But, I do feel that rub, and I'm grateful just, for that experience to be able to port it from one to the next because I feel like I have a good handle on what's hard about all of those things and can understand, like, where people are coming out from these different problems and how they're trying to solve them.
So, I guess, like, okay, so you said you had to change of heart over the weekend,
Yeah,
right? And so what was your final ending point there? Like,
yeah.
are you gonna stick with Laravel and bring in all the tools? Are you gonna go back and say, you know what, I like the JavaScript stack. I'm just more familiar with the language and the landscape. What was your
Yeah.
ultimate decision?
I'm That's a good question. I'm gonna stick with Laravel for right now.
Okay.
And right now, part of it is because those problems that I have within the JavaScript backend stuff are still hard. Like, when you're talking about trying to generate PDFs, you're talking about trying to save files, you're gonna have to reach for a different management system, whether it's the Cloudinary or something like that. Trying to handle job queuing. I can reach for ingest, yeah, it handles all those things, but again, trying to string all those services together is difficult where again, that's all to me, the hardest problems to solve. And I think that's the question is what's the harder problem to solve? To me, the harder problem right now is those back end pieces that Laravel solves.
Yeah.
And some of it is also, hear me say this, take this with a grain of salt, is that the front end stuff for this app is not overly complicated. The harder parts are like when I have nested components that it's like, and then trying to do reactivity and pass props up and down that tree. It's not like a heavy JavaScript app. If I'm doing something that's heavy JavaScript,
Yeah.
like dragging cards around or,
Yeah.
trying to, I don't know, list whatever you want, but like it's in this particular app, that's not the hard problem I'm trying to solve.
So what happens when the front end, let's say you're using Laravel, and you need some bits of JavaScript on the front end, and all of a sudden it starts getting more complicated. Now, instead of one file worth of JavaScript that you have to pull in on a page, it's getting complex. You want to break it out into a utils folder and a source
Yeah.
folder and name things and use imports, and now you kind of have to bundle it and probably
Yep.
minify and do all that stuff. Does Laravel help you with any of that, or does Alpine
Yeah.
help you with any of that, or are
Yes.
you now back in bundler config?
Yeah, so they do have, like a vconfig that you can add stuff to.
Okay,
And they do have support for, like, Livewire stuff and Alpine out of the box. Like, you can just add in they call it, I think, Breeze, and that gives you all your authentication. So, I mean, that's the other thing that's been interesting about the Laravel ecosystem is they have all these unique packages, which are awesome that you get all that out of the box. But
first
as
party, yeah.
somebody new to the framework, it's hard to keep all that stuff straight. And so
Yeah,
I
but
think
imagine if you're walking into JavaScript land and you have all of NPM at your fingertips and you're like, "What do I use?" Right? So,
It's
I
true.
like just being like, it's the bell curve, right? You
Uh-huh.
start where it's like,
Yep.
"How do I do this? Tell me how to do it." The top of the bell curve is like, "I can choose anything. I'm gonna make the best thing
Uh-huh.
ever." And then you go back to the end of the bell curve and you're like, "Just give me the prescribed solution." And
Yep.
I think I'm reaching that point in my career where I'm like, I'm gonna pick the thing that gets the job done the quickest and deal with a little bit of the rub where it
Yeah.
doesn't feel great, but know that, hey, you know what? That'll probably get better over time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I tell you what, since we're talking about opinions, let's kind of swing this the other way. I've talked a lot about Laravel. Let's talk about some of the JavaScript pieces of this. Because it's been interesting sitting on the Redwood side because that's how we're trying to position ourselves as a full stack application or
Yeah.
JavaScript framework. And so some of the opinions that we have and how those have played into our development, but then also people have said it's called
Adonis.
Adonis. So we're gonna have the creator of Adonis on. Right now he's scheduled for September, but I'm told him this is news to you. I've told him we're gonna try and bump up his episode because I'm anxious to have this conversation. But right now they are kind of positioned also as a full stack framework and trying to kind of compare the differences between the two. So I don't have experience with Adonis. I'm going to mispronounce it. I don't have experience with it, but looking at the docs is really interesting because I can see how people have said, oh, this is full stack because it uses that
Yeah.
MVC framework that we were talking about. So we kind of started to explain it. There's MVC, so model view controller. The view is like your templating pieces. The controller is the part that is like the glue. It says, this is the database call that you want. Here's the view. I'm going to stitch everything together. And so you have a router file that basically just will usually point to the controller that you're looking for. So, perfect. Adonis tries to use a similar framework. So if you look at their JavaScript, their documentation, it's using a lot of the same types of calls that, say, Laravel uses. It's using that same model view controller.
Yeah, and their approach isn't we're gonna take all the best JavaScript packages and kind of write a package around them that glues them all
Mhm.
together. Could be considered a pro or a con.
Yep.
depending on how you look at it. Uh, their their kind of like approach to this is we're going to make one package, like one provider. And yes, they have add-on packages like all the Laravel ones, but like this is our core, and then you can use our authenticator,
Yep.
our email one, our this, our that. And so, you do still have you can start simple and get more complex, but
Yep.
you don't have all those choices. You know exactly where to reach.
Yep.
And I'd be really curious as to why like this hasn't taken off more if this is truly what all of us JavaScripters are asking
They
for.
say they want. Well, and it's funny too, like with Redwood, and how I came to Redwood, let me kind of talk about that a little bit too, was we had David Price on the show early. We can include a link in the show notes. I'll have to go find it. Um, I had David Price on the show, and he was like, when you create a JavaScript application, these are all the things that you need. And it was like, you need Storybook, you need testing. You have to set all that stuff up yourself. What if
Yeah.
there's a framework that does that for you?
Yeah.
And so when I started digging into Redwood, it was like, oh yeah, this is the
That makes
exact
sense. Yeah.
stack that I would reach for. Like these are all the things. And so it was like these opinions were already my opinions that I would have picked anyways. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of an easy transition because it's like an opinionated uh solution that makes these decisions for you, but it's like we share the same opinion. So I don't have any problem with your opinions because we're in agreement. So I think, to your point, it is approaching it from a different perspective because we have pulled in Prisma, we have pulled in Vite, we have pulled in Storybook and all these other pieces. So, it is a different way of approaching the problem. To go back to your question, because I'm kind of talking in circles with Adonis, I think some of it is that particular architecture is so foreign to JavaScript
Yeah.
developers. They're not used to the model view controller. You're used to having your database calls right next to the component that needs it. And there's pros and cons to it. As all is in anything.
Yeah. But the more our frameworks show us routing as like the forefront of like, here's your router. This is how you route. This is how you
Mhm.
control data. I think it's going to be much easier for us to change our mental model to MVC. Whereas, like you said previously, it was like you're in some use effect fetching data next to the
Yep.
button that you clicked to do it. Like, no, now when the router is the first class citizen, you think more in those terms.
That's right. Well, and this is kind of interesting too. Are we here because it's JavaScript front to back? And so it's like I can do everything all in one place. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's part of why that pattern exists.
Well, it was that pendulum, right? The pendulum
Yeah.
swinging back and forth where it was
Yeah.
like, oh shit, now we can react very well to things that
Uh-huh.
happen on the front end. And now we can make these asynchronous calls, do whatever we want from the browser.
Right.
Why
Right.
do we need anything else?
Yeah.
You know?
And I see like with React Server Components, so this is why this is all really interesting. So with React Server Components, I can encapsulate all of my logic into that component, and then I can drop it on the page. And that component, whether you're using whether you're using Next, whether you're using Astra with React, whether you're using
Right.
Redwood, whatever, as long as it's a React framework remix, that component will work because it's all React Server Component piece. Because all that logic is there. And so if you're talking about spreading it out and more of that MVC framework,
Yeah.
how does that work? That's kind of interesting. It's not the same architecture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay, but one upside, I think, to, like, the Laravel and Adonis architectures, when they're all one thing, and even if they are a little bit
Mhm.
spread out, the whole ecosystem moves forward together because it all comes from Laravel or it all comes from Adonis, right? They're first
Yeah.
party libraries. When I'll pick on Redwood a little bit.
Yeah.
When vtest all of a sudden falls out of
Already.
favor, or when
Yeah.
Storybook falls out of favor as not the de facto
Yep.
way to like render components in isolation,
Mhm.
now like people either look at Redwood as outdated because they're
Yep.
holding outdated opinions, or lo and behold, you have to integrate another tool to like the new
Yep.
hot thing, right? Whereas like you're just taking it when it's Laravel and Adonis, you're just listening to what they say to use at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's fair feedback. We feel that.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, we feel that. We've had like we've recently migrated from Webpack to Vite. We feel that.
Yeah.
Or, there's I won't say what pieces of technology. There are pieces of technology in our stack that people have questioned.
Yeah.
Um, and so, that forces us to say, how tight do we want to hang on to this? How much support do we want to have? And what does the future look like? And it's kind of interesting because up until this point, I feel like things have kind of been settled. And this is the first time that we really have to pivot within those pieces.
Yeah, and I think that's why all these, things are happening right now is that the front end folks finally calmed down a little bit, you know?
Mhm,
We
mhm.
stopped making libraries and we started, like, leveling the playing field on, like, what we all kinda wanna standardize on. But
Yep,
it's still a choice, and at the
yep.
end of the day, it's probably harder to collect 10 choices and present it as one thing versus, like, build those 10 choices instead and say,
Mhm.
"Here's the solution. This is
Yep.
the only choice you have to make. When you pick us, everything else is decided for you."
Mhm, mhm. Yep. So,
Mm.
let me just say a few few thoughts to kinda close it off. If I were to do a new project right now, what would I use?
Ooh, yeah.
So I'm asking myself questions. It depends. This is the best developer answer. It depends on what the problem is I'm trying to solve. So,
Or I guess I would like to phrase it as, like,
yeah.
where you want the innovation to lie, because
Ooh, well,
a
that's a
lot
different question.
a lot
I'll
of
come back to that one.
a lot of products innovate on the back end. That's what they're
Yeah,
selling is the back
yeah,
end service.
that is
Other
true.
products are selling the front end.
Yeah, that is true. So, if it's like a password protected application, I'm
Mhm.
reaching for Redwood. That's where it's always shined. That's where it's always shined the best.
Good permission system and everything.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
built in.
yeah.
You don't have to worry about, like, SEO, you don't have to worry about all these other pieces. It's wonderful. Like, I would reach for Redwood. If I am working on a content heavy site that I want to be based in Markdown, I'm probably gonna reach for Astro.
Astro,
Yeah. Um, if it's like a smaller hackish project, I might reach for Remix, especially
Remix.
if I'm trying to do something with like Supabase or Zeta or a third party backend as a service. Reach for Remix. I'm not like anti Next. I've built plenty of stuff with Next. I think the only thing with Next is there's some decision fatigue because it can be a static site generator. It can
Yeah,
have the RFC support. And so it can do kind of all those things, but it's like, well, I know these other pieces do this thing really well. Like I know that's what I'm going to.
yeah.
Um,
Today, I don't see much difference between Remix and Next. They're
yeah.
solving the same problem. It's
Yep.
about preference at that point.
Yeah. DX. Yeah, exactly. And then, in this case, if you're trying to do a bunch of back end work, I look at Laravel.
Yeah. I think as soon as you hit, like, background processing,
Yep,
email, like,
yep,
those are the 2 things that would push me towards a back-end focused framework.
yep, yep. Now, I will say, give Redwood just a little bit more time. Feel like I have to
Yeah,
do my good solid plug because we have Mailer built in, which is really nice. It
nice.
works just like almost just like it does within Laravel. And then we've talked about solving some of those other problems that Laravel already does really well, like the file storage. Talked about that. We talked about queues, handling all those things. And I think that if and when Redwood gets there, then that will be a great time to reevaluate those 2 things.
You know, I think this is motivating me to actually try Adonis more than it is Laravel to actually get my
Really?
hands dirty with it.
Oh,
Mostly
that's
because, like,
funny.
all the conversation right now is about Laravel, but somebody needs to, step up and
Mhm.
represent the JavaScript, TypeScript ecosystem and say, "Hey, we have something that might work for this.
Mm.
Let's bring it
Yeah.
into the limelight and show everybody that this is a viable thing." Um,
Now, without having built a project within Adonis, just looking at
yeah.
their feature set, the only feature that they offer that we do not is file system storage.
Ah,
And obviously we integrate with tons of options. There's cookbooks on our site for working with FileZilla and Cloudinary and stuff like that. But out of the box, that's the only thing that we do not support. Are you
okay,
reading?
Drive is cool. So Drive is okay, I'm looking at their feature set
Yeah.
now. So Drive is blob storage. It's a S3 competitor.
Mhm.
They got rate limiting.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we have middleware with our new stuff. So
Cool.
once you start doing middleware with SSR and RSC, you'll have that rate limiting ability.
They've got a Zod equivalent, so it's like a validation
Mhm.
library. They've got accessibility. Oh no, Ally.
Yeah, so
Ally's not accessibility. It's not A11Y. It's
oh,
ALLY. It's social logins,
oh, okay, yep.
mailer, health check, internationalization, caching, their own custom ORM. Okay, I mean, what am I not seeing? They got the email. What about permissions? Where's permissions?
I think they
Auth
had,
with
yeah, how the
support
auth
for
stuff was
sessions,
handled.
tokens,
Yep.
basic auth. They're not really talking about permissions. They're talking about
Does it say anything
authentication,
about
not authorization.
generators? Because that would be another thing that we have that's really nice. You can just scaffold stuff really fast.
Fake data generation. That's all I'm seeing.
Okay.
But yeah, this to me is something like I would love to try. And I can
What about
stay in
their
my
RS
happy place.
what about their what about their RSC support? Does it say anything about that? Like, is it React? Is it even React?
No, so I'm not even sure it. Okay,
Ah.
so where's a view? Show me a view. It's I see routes, controllers, models,
Yeah, all that stuff looked
validators.
like Laravel to me.
So what I'm seeing here is their view library is something called Edge. It's a batteries included template engine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then does this not solve that rich front
Mm,
end problem?
maybe not.
Yeah.
Again, just approaching a problem from a different angle.
Yep.
Do you want to is there anything else you wanna say before we move into picks and plugs?
No, okay, be open to trying new things at the end of the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
right?
So well, I'll make this my plug.
Figure
Sorry.
out where these tools shine, try
Yeah.
them. Don't be an armchair developer like I've been on this episode, throwing opinions around and I'm barely getting my hands dirty with any of this. So, yeah, try it
Yeah.
out and have conversations and be open to new stuff. Don't ever
Mm,
sit on your technology and act like it's the king for things because, it was developed with a use case in mind and that's where it's going to do well at.
yeah. So, for the next segment of the show, we have picks and plugs where we pick something generally that we've bought on Amazon or that we like, and then we plug something that we're working on. So, I'm going to go first. Just throw it out there. And I plug first because it relates to the content. So sign up for my newsletter, brokencomb.dev. Talked about this before, but it's the idea of with a comb that you comb your hair with. You go wide on tech, but you also go deep as you gain experience. And so as you become a more experienced developer, it'll probably look like a broken comb because you'll have more experience in different areas. The reason I say this is I will post in the newsletter information about a project that I'm working on. So I have comparingframeworks.com. There's nothing there if you go there, but I'll talk about it in the newsletter. I am working on a project with Sentry right now to compare Svelte, Redwood, Next App, Next Pages, and Remix. There's I think that's all of them. I think that's all of them. There's 6 of them. But I'm building the same app 6 different ways. And so you really get to feel what are all the differences between all these frameworks. And so as we're talking about not being an armchair developer, create your own opinions, that kind of thing. This will be a resource that will try its best to explain all those differences so that you can have opinions about your developer experience and what your preferences are. So
That's crazy. How far are you through all that?
oh my goodness, it's such a beast of a project.
Yeah.
The Redwood application is built. So I
Mhm.
actually used that within a workshop that I did at React Summit in November. But I'm still just trying to like crank through all the content and stuff like that. So, and then there's all that, like actually building the app and the content around it. And then there's also building the landing page to be able to house and deliver all of that content.
Yeah.
So, like 7 sites, not even 6, it's 7. But I've even thought, I'm not going to do it yet, but I've even thought about like throwing Laravel onto the mix since I've now been experimenting with this just to point out some of those differences as well.
Might as well do Adonis, do Rails. I mean, just
Why not? All the ways. Oh, it has Astro. I don't think I said Astro.
oh, there
I
you
never
go.
forget Astro. Yep. So, anyways, check that out, but go to brokencomb.dev because I'll start posting stuff there before you see it on the comparingframeworks.com site. For my pick, I should have. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll throw this out here. So I just bought a new camera. So if I need one. But I bought the Insta360 X2. So I got an X2, not an X3. They have an X3. And the difference is with the X2, you have this little round screen, and an X3, you have a big screen. But the reason that I opted for, and this is a little case. So what's interesting about this camera is it actually does 360 video. So it has
Yep.
2 pieces of video that it will then stitch together. And the reason that I opted for the smaller screen was because I was like, if I just hold this up, it's capturing everything. I really don't have to see what I'm capturing. And then it has an app on your phone where you can do your compositions and export out your video. So anyways, I'm wanting to get back into vlogging. And so I got a new camera to make it fun.
Is that all it does? Is those cool, like, yeah, circular 360 videos? Or
Yeah,
does
you
it
can
do regular video as well?
it'll do regular video. And so
Okay,
you can even pick like your shot selection.
cool.
It is ultra wide, but you can also
Yeah, kind of
you can
fisheye, like,
well, you can also kinda get a more normal picture because I think that's, like, my thing is I'm like, "Well, I don't wanna look crazy distorted in my shot." You can get it some of it is just, like, depending on how you shoot it because you don't wanna shoot on the seam. So where those 2 pieces are trying to stitch together, like, you don't want the edge of the camera pointed to you, you want the actual lens pointed to you.
yep,
Um, but you can also do more of, like, what you're describing as those circular videos where you can see
yeah,
your entire surroundings. But I mean, YouTube had me pegged, and I was just, like, watching all these crazy videos that people were creating with
yeah.
these cameras, and I was like, "This is just really fun, to do something different that I can't do with my iPhone." So, like I said, it's the Insta360 one, and the X2 is the one that I have.
New gear is always fun. I haven't bought new gear in a while, which is just like the JavaScript ecosystem, I'm slowing down.
It's probably better because 'cause I'm
It's
like,
really good.
I just don't wanna collect I've bought enough camera gear over the years, and I don't wanna just collect stuff that I'm not gonna use.
Yeah.
'Cause do you wanna see this? This is I also got this one. This is embarrassing, but the Insta360 Go 3. So it's like a GoPro almost, but the cool thing is the back flips up,
Oh,
and
nice.
this is the part that's really nice. Get this. The front, this piece pops out. So this is a camera, and you can just carry this around, and
That's
this is
awesome.
waterproof. And
Yeah.
even while I have this out, you can see oh, look, it's came on. You can
No
see the
way.
video on the screen. Yeah.
That's
So,
cool.
anyways, this, the shots that people get with this on YouTube and Instagram and all the things are really interesting too
Yeah.
because it's a small camera. You can stick it in crazy places.
Anywhere, yeah.
So,
That's awesome. Camera
yeah,
gear is so cool. It's getting
I know,
good.
I know. Okay. Your picks and plugs.
Okay, let's see. For me, I I've still been playing a bunch of video games lately. Um, Minecraft was last week's
Yes.
pick, and I thought Minecraft at some points felt like a little bit directionless. There's not like there's no
Sure.
prescribed thing to do, even though there's kind of like an end boss to the game. So I was looking for like something in the same vein, something chill, but something with a bit more like tell me what to do. And everybody at work was like, "Dude, you have to play Stardew Valley. You have to play Stardew Valley. You have to play Stardew Valley."
I haven't
So I
heard of
bought
this
it.
one.
It was only 15 bucks. So
What?
like it was very cheap.
Okay.
Um and it is. It's kind of like that chill zen farming game, but there's always something to do. There's always a quest to do or something, and it's just been doing good at like winding down in the evenings. So there's a link in chat.
Perfect.
I've been liking it. I'm probably only like 2 or 3 hours into it, but it's getting the job done for what I was looking for.
Nice. Have to my son's always looking for new games, so I'll have to look into that one for him.
Good one. Um, and then for me, I'm just gonna plug my YouTube channel. Been cranking out videos. Actually, a lot of the videos that I've been putting out have been airing on the Cloudinary channel on their Dev Hints series. So I've done a bunch of those with Colby, and you can go check me out over there on the Cloudinary channel. But my personal channel, I'm still trying to put out something like once every week or two. The last video I had was about like basic front end developer skills that you need to get your first job. Somebody asked me that on LinkedIn, and I actually looked at LinkedIn and I saw the question. I'm like, this is a good video. And then the first comment on that video was like, awesome. What about for senior devs? And I'm like, ooh, I like that question even better. Like, how do you how do you present yourself as a senior dev? What kind of skills do you need to know? And you'll see, like, in the video that I'm planning in my head, it's not about skills anymore. It's not about, like, technologies that you know. It's about determining use cases and talking
Mhm.
about trade-offs and talking about what's important when it comes to architecture or how to build an app, and that's where this stuff, you can really see the difference between the 2 videos. So I think that's the next one I'm gonna do,
Yeah.
and it'll make a good compare and contrast.
Yeah, that's a great one. I was looking at stuff, that people were posting a while back about, like, if you're trying to go after, say, a senior not a senior design job, like a manager, or director designer job. Like, what do you do? Because at that point, you're not the person that's pushing pixels.
Yeah.
So it is helpful, yeah, to have a portfolio and show that you understand good design. But at that point, you're also trying to showcase your people skills. And so it's a completely different skill set that you're trying to show people that you have experience in. And so one of the things it was even suggesting, I'm not sure what the dev equivalent would be, but like showing, okay, this is how I do job interviews, and this is how I assess people, or this is how I show growth. These are exercises that I've done with my team. Like, it's a completely different way of thinking and presenting yourself than if you're an individual contributor.
Yeah, those are the types of questions that I've always struggled with, like, or even
Mhm.
the system design question, or when, like, somebody from product comes and sits down with you and asks you stuff, and it's like, I never know exactly quite what they're looking for at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I think it just comes down to having really good conversations in an interview.
Yeah.
Find something that clicks with the interviewer and yourself and go deep on it, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, it becomes even harder now when you have AI that's doing, like, that first pass, and you've gotta get through the the AI
oh, yeah.
filter in order to get the interview.
We'll be writing AI generated resumes being filtered by AIs before you can ever get to sit down with a person.
I know, lame.
Yeah.
Alright, well, this has been a fun one. I knew it would be.
Yeah, always.
Awesome. If you are listening later in the audio version and the podcatcher of your choice, please leave a rating and review. That helps other people find the show. And for now, that's all we got. Sweet. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call it. My kids are on summer break as of last Thursday, and I'm solo parenting.
Oh, yeah, we should talk. I know we're still live. Hi,
Yep.
everybody. We should talk about when we should record the podcast because we both have kids that
Oh,
are off for summer.
yeah. Yep.
Today's ours last day. So, yeah,
Ooh, fun times.
hit you up in the Discord, talk about that because I don't know if around lunchtime is going to be the best time
Yeah,
to record.
that's true. True that. Okay. Thanks for hanging out, everybody.
See y'all later,
Talk to
stream.
you later.